Our gospel reading this morning comes from John's gospel. John is the last of the four canonical gospels to have been written. And it is interesting to trace how this particular story that I'm about to read to you develops over the course of time. In Mark's gospel, the first of the gospels, written a good 30 or maybe as many as 50 years before John, the woman in the story is unnamed. By the time we get to the Gospel of John, the woman has been identified as Mary, the sister of Martha, in the famous story of Mary and Martha. And Mary and Martha are portrayed as the sisters of Lazarus. The story of the raising of Lazarus from the dead is also told in John and only in John. So we have this progression in terms of the development of this story from an unknown woman to a woman who we like to think we know. Hear these words. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, the home of Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. There they gave a dinner for him. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those at the table. Mary took a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard, anointed Jesus' feet, and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. He kept the common purse and used to steal what was put into it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. You always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me." When the great crowd of the religious leaders learned that Jesus was there, they came not only because of Jesus, but also to see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. So the chief priests planned to put Lazarus to death as well, since it was on account of him that many of the Jews were deserting and believing in Jesus.
I don't care who hears me, Lazarus. How dare he? How dare he talk about our sister that way, Judas? After all the trouble that I went through to make this such a nice meal for Jesus. What, you're surprised I'm defending her after the last time that Jesus was here for dinner? Oh, I admit, it stung a bit when Jesus chastised me and wouldn't ask Mary to help with the meal, especially when he said that it was the better way that she chose. But afterwards, after I calmed down, I realized he was right. He wasn't talking about what I did, but about how I was doing it. I'd lost the heart, the reason I had started with that meal anyway. So when Jesus said to me that she had chosen the better way, I knew what he meant. He meant that Mary was sitting and she was listening, but it wasn't her sitting and listening that made the difference. It was that she was fully paying attention. Me, I was caught up in my self-pity over Mary not helping. So he was right. But tonight was different. I was different. I've been different, all because of Jesus. Tonight, I wanted this to be special for him. I wanted this to be a time I could show my love and appreciation. You know that I'm not as emotionally able to show things as Mary is. Oh, go ahead and laugh, brother. I know you've been with us for decades and you know all about our differences. But I just wanted to show Jesus how appreciative I was, how grateful we are that he brought you back from the dead. I know, brother, you don't want to talk about that, and I respect that. Still, tonight was going to be a night where he could just be with friends. You know, I hoped tonight would be a night where he could just feel like he was among loved ones. And then it was ruined. No, not by Mary Lazarus, but by Judas. I do admit I was a little shocked when she came out and started anointing Jesus' feet. But then I knew what she was doing. I understood. She was doing exactly what I was doing. She was trying to express her love for Jesus in a way and show her how much we appreciate him. But Judas had to go and ruin that. Why wasn't this money all spent, or this perfume spent and money sent for the poor? As if he cared about the money or the poor. You didn't see him complaining at all when he was eating that sumptuous feast that we prepared. No, he wasn't trying to embarrass Mary, to make her ashamed. And he knew he couldn't do it by criticizing the way she was doing it, that she was anointing this man in public. It was so obvious that Jesus himself not only allowed it, but welcomed it. Some of the disciples even started shaking their heads in agreement with him. I saw it. You may not have, Lazarus, but I did. I couldn't believe that he would challenge the teacher in that way. I was ready to defend Mary. Oh, you know, Lazarus, that no matter what happens between us sisters, if someone comes after one of us, we'll go after them. But Jesus was quicker. Well, you know the rest of what happened. But it was too late. The mood was ruined. And instead of a nice, quiet night where Jesus could not have to think about what was going on, thanks to Judas and some of the other disciples, it reminded him of the opposition that he's going to face when he gets to Jerusalem. I'm sorry, brother. You know how I go on about nothing and get all upset. You look tired, Lazarus. Why don't you go off to bed, and I'll finish up here. I'll see you in the morning, brother. Abba? Jesus says I can call you that. I hope he's right, because I don't want to offend you. But Abba, I'm worried. I'm worried about Lazarus. He hasn't been the same since he came back from the dead. Oh, don't get me wrong. I am so appreciative of having this extra time with him, to have a chance to give him a hug, to see his smile, even to be annoyed when he doesn't close the door. But there's something different about him, a heaviness, a seriousness, as if he knows something. He won't talk about it at all. Anytime anybody asks, he'll just look at them, smile softly, and say, it's something he can't put into words. I've even heard there are people who want to kill him, Abba, so that they can get rid of the proof of Jesus' action. I'm worried about Lazarus. I hope he had a chance to talk about it with Jesus. They were deep in discussion when Mary came in. And Jesus himself had a sense of foreboding around him tonight, God, as if he knew something. I could feel the tension when the apostles and all the disciples came in, but I just passed it off as being exhaustion on their part. But then Mary came in and anointed, and she set it all off. I could feel the room shift. It was as if it was filled with fear, anxiety, even resentment. And then Judas challenged the teacher. I don't know, God. I'm so scared about what's going to happen next. That day when I went out and met Jesus, when Lazarus was still dead, when he asked me, Martha, do you believe I am the resurrection and the life? I don't know, something shifted in me. Maybe it was my grief over Lazarus that made me vulnerable and opened up something in me. But as Jesus asked, did I believe that he was the light and love of the world that you were sending? I knew that he was the one. I've heard people talking. They are talking about that he's come to lead a revolt, to overthrow the Romans. Now I know that he's the Messiah, oh God, and that scares me. It scares me not for myself, but for him and what it might mean. Everyone thinks that he's going to go in and do this revolution and overthrow the Romans. And you know the Romans won't stand for that. I've even heard that some of the temple priests are already discussing what they're going to do when Jesus comes to contain any problems. I am terrified, God. So terrified, Abba, of what may happen to Jesus during this Passover. I'm terrified that when he doesn't lead that revolution, everyone will turn on him like Judas did tonight. I'm terrified that the authorities won't even wait to see what he has done before arresting him for treason. What horrifies me the most, Abba, is that this may all be happening because of what Jesus did for us out of love, of bringing Lazarus back to us. So watch over them, Abba. Watch over Jesus and watch over Lazarus, especially Jesus. I'm dreading this Passover. I'm dreading it for what may come.